So here we are, a few days after the Pisces new moon, and we are freshly into Aries season. And I want to speak to the energy that is coming up right now. And there's so much coming forth, right? And just to give you an idea, this lunar cycle that I am anchoring into, that I'm really getting a read on the energetic imprint here, is between the time of March 18th through April 17th, right? So this is the frame of time of the Pisces lunar cycle. So while the sun initiated a solar cycle um, in Aries, we're having the moon cycle in Pisces. So I want to speak to these two energies, what they're sharing, what the initiation is here, and how they are working together. So what's been really alive and coming forth here, that is in alignment with the Pisces energy, Pisces lunar cycle. And it's interesting that, we had the new moon just at the end of the solar cycle, right? And so Pisces new moon came at the end of the Pisces solar, at the end of what we call Pisces season. So the way that this really um has been speaking to me, like through this lens, is the experience of being the one and being part of the all, right? Coming into oneness, coming into our connection to all that is, right? And that brings us to existence, right? What is existence? Existence is beingness, is isness. It just is, it just bees, right? And so to be a human, or to have that human existence, it's like this beingness is being experienced. Can I use the same word? Being experienced in a physical reality, right? And so if we even look at the existence as consciousness, it's like our consciousness is condensed, like the greater consciousness in some ways is separating and condensing itself into physical form, right? And so our consciousness is experiencing reality within a limited state, right? So there's that container and that structure. And so the hardest thing here, in my experience, and when talking to others, especially right now, is just allowing ourselves to be human, to be present, and to enjoy this reality, to enjoy this life, when we see all of these like distorted, disgusting, sad, just so many, all of the emotions, all of the energies that are heavy and low. We see that happening in our external world on a collective level, right? And there's beauty in between, say, the ugliness. But again, it's like this experience of the wax and the wane of like, oh my gosh, I'm having this really joyful moment. But then also it coincides with like these really heavy, horrible things that are happening. Right. And so then we have this mix of emotions where, oh, I'm feeling really excited and inspired and like want to celebrate whatever's coming through or whatever I'm experiencing. But then you feel guilt and shame about feeling that way because there are people suffering, there are humans suffering, right, at this moment in time. And so right now what I'm getting is that, especially with this Pisces energy so present, is that we are experiencing the paradox of duality. And we're experiencing being the one, right, having our own individual experience in those emotions, while also being a part of the collective, of the group, of the one, and having those emotions, those feelings, whatever's coming up, having that experience, right? And so how do we find balance between the two? And so I actually had a conversation about this earlier today. I did a live stream with my dear friend Jackie, and we talked about honoring your humanity. That was the topic. So if you enjoy what I'm speaking about here, you should definitely check out that live conversation on my YouTube channel, as it was like incredibly potent, and it just goes more into what I'm speaking here for the energy, right? The energetic imprint at this time that I'm seeing or feeling, tuning into, coming forth for this lunar cycle. And you get to also hear Jackie's perspective, which is amazing. And so we were speaking about honoring your humanity, going through what is existence, what is human existence, and what does it mean to honor your humanity, right? And so from my understanding, I bring it back to the ego. I bring it back to our human existence and what that entails. And so the ego essentially is said to be the anchor for our consciousness to be here, to experience life on earth, to experience being a human in this reality, in this physical reality. That is the role of the ego. It's the anchor, right? It's here to anchor in the illusion of separation, right? And the ego isn't bad. The ego is a neutral mechanism. And I like what Jackie said. She said that the ego essentially is like the project manager, like it's the tour guide. We feed the ego through our belief systems, through our emotions, through our desires. We feed the ego, direct the ego of what it is that we want to experience and create, what it is, as far as like the world that we desire to experience, the life that we desire to experience. Those desires feed the ego. And then the ego helps in the way that it does to produce what it is that we desire from our thoughts, from our emotions, from our beliefs, from our knowingness. And so that in itself, being a human and the nature of the game here on earth is learning that through separation, through the forgetting. And then as we evolve and grow, right? And this is like all in the perspective of the 3D. So the 3D essentially is that pure state of being within the ego, right? Where the ego thrives. But of course, there are varying degrees, right? There are varying phases, shades of the 3D, right? Like you can be completely asleep in the 3D and the ego just takes, like you're moving through life unconsciously and the ego kind of takes the front seat there. Or you have getting, as you awaken more and more, you're starting to learn that you can set intentions, that you create your reality, paying attention to your thoughts, right? And then speaking that out or making those choices and the ego following suit. And of course, the ego, there's going to be a bit of a struggle because the ego essentially is wanting to keep the reality in alignment with the beliefs. So when you change your beliefs, there's a little bit of lag time of how things shift in your external world. And so that essentially is a 3D. But when we awaken to the 4D, from my understanding, is that we are now mastering the existence within the paradox, right? We're breaking through, or we're clearing through the illusion of separation, and we're understanding that we're all connected, right? And so what's the saying here? That we experience the world as we are, right? So our external reality is completely subjective. And this is also how I can explain, or I tend to explain parallel realities as essentially we are like two people can be in the same place, doing the same thing, having the same, like say they're like you and your friend are both going to like a haunted house, right? I don't know why this came to mind. I feel like I had this thought before, specifically with the haunted house. You could be completely scared and like, oh my God, that was the scariest thing, experiencing all the jump scares and all of this. And the other friend just walks through and it's like, that was terrible. I wasn't afraid. I saw like the person put their mask on before they came out. Like it's completely different experience, even though you both were there at the same time together, right? And that's because of your own internal beliefs, thoughts. Like somebody might more so be thinking about, oh, well, I know that's not like really a monster. That's like a human dressed up in this costume I saw him put his mask on. So you're paying attention to those details versus the other person who also knows that, but they can like, what do they call it? Suspend belief and totally immerse in the environment, right? And so that ability, those thoughts, those beliefs, those perceptions will create a reality of like, oh my gosh, they totally got me. Like I jumped every time, like they're hanging on to their friend, like protect me. And so it's like you can experience, you can be in the same like place at the same time, experiencing the same thing, but in a different way. Like it's experienced in a different way, right? And so that is the nature of what we experience being subjective. It's all like a reflection of our internal world, right? And so when it comes to the collective, what we're all seeing as far as what's the war that's happening, just all the distortions, this essentially is a manifestation, is a reflection of our collective internal distortions, right? What we have suppressed, what we are shameful to experience. Shout out to Jackie. We didn't mention this in our live. And I feel like her and I just bounce our conversations and our ideas and thoughts off one another. This was weeks ago, but, and this is a very sensitive topic, but something that came up was that we were talking about the abuse of women and children, right? And like we were talking about the Epstein files and all that was coming through at the time. And she mentioned that, like I mentioned the distortions of what's happening collectively internally. And she mentioned that this is like such a reflection of the suppression of the abuse of the suppression of the divine feminine, the distortions within the divine feminine and what we reject, right? Collectively, right? The power over, power under, right? Of the divine feminine, the divine masculine, the imbalance, right? And what I am tuning into, how this is so related to that as well, is that what I have been tuning into is that this great awakening, this major shift that's happening is there's a shift in consciousness that is more integrated in the divine feminine within all of us, right? So that's coming to the forefront, this wave of consciousness, this activation, right? And so it makes sense that this, like this is out on the world stage essentially for all of us to see, and we can't ignore it, right? Right now, it may seem like it's not getting a lot of traction, but it really is, right? It's stirring so much within us. And when we do our inner work individually, that helps the collective, right? And that helps us to process this. And again, there's this lag time of when it changes the outer world. Like that experience there, what's really hard is to accept, to take responsibility of what is happening collectively, right? Because in some ways it's out of our control. Like we can't change the entire world, but where we start is with ourselves and then helping someone else. And then they help someone else. And then we come together in community. And it doesn't, obviously, it's not linear like that, but you get what I'm saying. And then the healing, the integration, the shift happens on a major level. And that shift has been happening for some time, like even in the early 2000s. Like my spiritual awakening was in 2005. And it was all experiential. I was just, doing rituals with my coven sisters and, like playing in the full moon and just being immersed in that, playing with tarot cards. I wasn't like teaching, I wasn't sharing on social media or anything. It was completely experiential. And then I went to school to study astronomy and physics, then graduated and came back around to like that spiritual feminine aspect of like studying the stars and the nature of existence. And now here I am, right? And so it's a process, but that led me to recording this video right now and sharing and hopefully inspiring those of you hearing this transmission. So it's really important that we show up for ourselves and do the inner work. And that inner work is not easy. And taking that accountability of what's happening in the collective, and that comes back to taking accountability of your own shadows, your own fears, your own shame and guilt. It comes back to the emotional presence. And so that's what I'm really feeling into with the Pisces energy, right? Like the one individual, but then coming back into the oneness. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And it said, if you take yourself on the journey, the evolution through the zodiac signs starting at Aries, you get all the way to Pisces, and Pisces essentially holds all of the signs within itself because it's already had that journey. It's come to the end of the cycle where it comes back to the oneness, it comes back to source, it comes back to self, right? And in order to come back to have that full experience of coming back to yourself and unlocking a deeper layer and connecting with the divine, we have to really forgive ourselves, right? Self-forgiveness is everything. Compassion, surrender. You know, these are words we hear all the time, but it's really important when we are having the experience of emotional, or we are having that emotional presence. We're holding that experience. And so essentially moving towards that Aries energy, right? As I'm recording this, March 22nd, we are in the Aries solar cycle. And so that solar cycle, right, is that creative expression. It's the divine intelligence and the willpower, the creation, just that fire inside is how I connect with the sun. And the sun actually also represents the ego, right? And so, with that to say, with the solar cycle being in Aries, that essentially speaks to the courage, the bravery to be present with our emotions, with the shadow, you know, with taking a leap of faith, of trusting and knowing that you will not lose yourself within your emotions, knowing who it is that you are, like trying to, or I shouldn't say trying, I don't really like the word trying, but doing your best to know who you are as you search or as you connect more deeper with yourself, like connecting to that, knowing that you're not the monster, you're not the bad person, right? And that you have the power to change your reality, to make a difference in your life and in someone else's life. Maybe not the whole world, but we're all connected. So when you are changing yourself, you are changing the whole world in that sense. And I think it's really interesting how the full moon of this lunar cycle is in Libra, right? And so again, that's coming back to finding that balance, finding that sense of neutrality, and being able to enjoy being an individual, but also being a part of the collective, having that ability to be happy while there is suffering in the world, right? It's even hard for me to say that, right? But then when you feel the shame, when you feel the anger, when you feel the, you know, wave of melancholy, be in that. Don't try to avoid, don't try to distract, just be in that energy. And most importantly, the next step is to be in it without attaching a story. Don't make it mean anything, release the definition, because when you do allow yourself to be in that energy, then you are able to be in the emotion. See, I'm already distracted. Talk about being in the energy. When you're allowing yourself to be in the emotion, you, without the definition, right? Then you're able to receive that whatever was meant to come forth through that, right? You will receive the insight, the guidance, the healing, whatever's meant to be in that space is probably a little bit of all of those, right? Right. So we'll definitely check in with this energy here for that within the next transmission. We'll check to see what else is coming through. I invite you to pay attention to your dreams, and we'll touch bases and see what has come forth, right? What messages are here. And also, we will tune in and see what else the astrological energetics are coming through to, you know, inform us at this time. And being in this space with this set intention of the energy informing us, we are going to get more and more insight, more and more downloads at this time. So I'm really excited to share the next transmission here. And I will also share some small embodiment practices or some journal prompts just to get the energy flowing, right? But again, we really just want to be in the energy. We don't really want to think about it. So honestly, the best embodiment practice at this time, especially at the beginning of the cycle, is to just really feel what's coming through, right? And in that experience of feeling, then journal your reflections, right? Or if there's like a story that comes through, a message, whatever comes through after you felt the emotion, and like you'll know, like don't wait for it, just like be present with where you are now, and you will receive when you're meant to receive, and you'll make that connection. When you make that connection, write it down. I would love to see what's coming through for you all, so feel free to leave it on the group page. And until then, I'll see you in the next one.